By the time my wife walked out of that courtroom, she had already told half the county that I was going to lose everything. She was wrong. But let me take you back to the moment I knew exactly how this was going to end. The night Sandra moved her things into the spare bedroom. She didn't even try to hide it anymore. She left the door open while she packed. Blouses, shoes, the perfume I'd given her on our 10th anniversary. Stacking everything into those big canvas bags like she was checking out of a hotel. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold and watched the shadows shift under the door down the hall. Our son was at my brother's place for the weekend. The house was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator hum. She came down around 9, dropped her keys on the counter and said, "I think we both know this isn't working anymore." I nodded. I didn't argue. I didn't ask about him. The coworker, the one I'd known about for 4 months. I just said, "Okay." She looked at me like she expected something different. A fight, maybe. Tears. Something she could use. When she didn't get it, she picked up her keys again, grabbed the canvas bags by the door, and left. I sat there another hour. Then I picked up my phone and called my brother. "She's gone," I said. It was quiet for a second. "Then you already talked to the attorney?" "Last Tuesday," I said. He exhaled slowly. "Good. You doing all right?" "I will be," I said, and I meant it. My name is Marcus. I'm 43 years old. I grew up in a small town outside of Lubbock, Texas, the older of 2 boys. My father ran a heating and cooling business out of a garage for 30 years, and when he passed, he left that business. The equipment, the contracts, the client list, all of it to me and my brother Danny. We'd both worked summers there since we were 14. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. Sandra and I met at a friend's wedding when I was 31. She was in marketing, quick-witted, funny, and she had this way of entering a room like she already knew everyone in it. I was charmed, completely and immediately. We dated for 2 years, got married in the fall, bought a house together the following spring. At first it was good. The early years usually are. The business grew steadily. Danny handled operations, I handled clients and contracts. We expanded into commercial HVAC work. Picked up a school district contract, then a municipal building. By the time I was 40, the company was worth something real. Something we'd built from our father's tools and our father's reputation. Sandra never had much interest in the business. That was fine. She had her own career, her own ambitions. But somewhere in the middle years, something shifted. She started talking about the company like it was a shared asset, like she'd had some hand in it. She'd say things at dinner parties like, "Our business and what we built together." And I'd catch Danny's eye across the table, and we both let it pass. I didn't know then that she was already laying the groundwork. I found out about the affair on a Tuesday in February. I came home early from a client meeting that got canceled, and she was on a call in the back office, the door half closed, laughing in a way I hadn't heard in years. I didn't barge in. I stood in the hallway and I listened, and what I heard was enough. I didn't confront her that night, or the next. I went about my routine, dinner, work, driving our son to soccer practice, and I thought. I thought hard and I thought long, and what I kept coming back to was this. My father built that business. Danny and I grew it. Sandra had contributed exactly nothing to it, and I was not going to let a single moment of her choices take it from us. The following Monday, I called a family law attorney named Patricia Hollis, a woman my accountant had recommended twice over the years in casual conversation. I didn't know why I'd stored her name in the back of my mind, but I had. I told her I needed to understand my situation. She had an opening Thursday morning. Her office was on the 2nd floor of a building downtown. Nothing fancy. Wood-paneled walls, diplomas, a window that looked out over a parking lot. She poured 2 cups of coffee and asked me to start from the beginning. I told her everything. The business inheritance, the premarital assets, the house we bought together, the mortgage I'd carried the first 3 years while Sandra was still building her client base, the affair, the 4 months I'd known. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she set down her cup and said, "The business is your strongest card. Inherited business assets with clear documentation, your father's will, the original LLC filings, the transfer of ownership. Those don't automatically become marital property in Texas, especially with the right paper trail. Danny and I restructured the ownership 2 years ago," I said. "Moved to a formal partnership agreement." Our attorney drew it up. She smiled slightly. "Get me every document related to that restructuring." I handed her a folder. I'd brought it with me. The next 8 weeks were the quietest I'd ever lived. Sandra and I moved around each other in the house like furniture, polite and careful. She didn't know I'd been to see an attorney. She didn't know I'd been photographing documents, organizing records, building a timeline. She didn't know that Danny had quietly begun keeping his own records of her references to our company at family gatherings. Dates, contexts, witnesses. What she did know was that she had a lawyer. His name was Garrett Cole, and she'd hired him before she ever moved into the spare bedroom. I found that out later. By the time she left on that Tuesday night, Garrett Cole had already sent a letter to Patricia's office. I'll say this about my wife. She was not a stupid woman. She was organized, strategic, and she had an instinct for leverage. What she underestimated was how long I'd had to prepare. The letter from Garrett Cole was confident. It listed assets, the house, joint accounts, retirement contributions, and here it was, the business. He claimed Sandra had made substantial indirect contributions to the growth and stability of the business through her role as a supportive spouse and household manager. 15 words that must have taken him an hour to write. Patricia called me the same afternoon the letter arrived. They're going after the business, she said. I know. This is going to get uncomfortable. I know that too, I said. What do we do? We show them exactly what the business is, she said, and exactly what it isn't. The deposition was held on a Wednesday morning in March. Garrett Cole sat across the table from Patricia looking like a man who had already won. Sandra sat beside him in a gray blazer, composed. She looked at me once when I walked in, then didn't look again. Garrett led her through it carefully. Her years as a homemaker during a period when I'd asked her to cut back on work. The household management. The integral role in supporting my professional growth. He was painting a picture of partnership, of joint effort, of a marriage that had built something together. Then Patricia started asking questions. She asked Sandra to describe the business. Sandra said it was HVAC, heating and cooling. Patricia asked her to name the 3 largest commercial contracts. Sandra paused. Patricia asked her to name the original clients inherited from my father's business. Sandra said she didn't know the specifics. Patricia asked her to describe her involvement in the municipal contract negotiation in 2019. Sandra said she hadn't been directly involved. Patricia asked her to identify, from a list of 12, which company accounts she had signatory authority on. Sandra pointed to one, a joint household account used for shared expenses, not a business account. Not one. Garrett objected and redirected, but the record was the record. Patricia then walked through the ownership documents. The original will, naming me as primary inheritor of the business assets. The 2009 LLC filing, predating our marriage by 2 years. The 2021 partnership restructuring, signed and witnessed and entirely consistent with a business that had always been mine and Danny's, never Sandra's. When we broke for lunch, Patricia leaned over and said quietly, "She has nothing on the business. Garrett knows it now. The house is what this comes down to. The house is the complicated part. We bought it together. Both our names on the deed, both our incomes on the mortgage application, though I'd carried a larger share in the early years. Texas is a community property state for marital assets. The house was marital. There was no clean workaround. What there was, however, was fault. Texas is one of a shrinking number of states where adultery can influence the division of marital property. It doesn't guarantee anything, but it gives a judge discretion. Patricia had been building that case for 2 months. She had the phone records I'd preserved. She had the testimony of a friend of mine who'd seen Sandra with her coworker at a restaurant in Dallas. Behavior inconsistent with a professional relationship. She had, most critically, a series of Instagram posts Sandra had made over the past 3 months. Posts that told a very specific story. Sandra had made a mistake that a lot of people in her position make. Feeling certain of her outcome, she had gotten ahead of herself. There were photos. Nothing explicit, nothing that crossed a clear line. But photographs of her at dinners, at weekend trips with a man who was not her husband, and captions that a reasonable person could read only one way. She'd tagged locations, she'd mentioned feelings, and she'd left everything public. Patricia printed them all. Dates, times, geolocation data. When Garrett Cole saw the stack of printouts at our next meeting, something in his posture changed. He asked for a recess. He and Sandra stepped out. They were gone for 22 minutes. When they came back, Garrett said he wanted to discuss settlement. The settlement negotiation lasted 3 sessions over 2 weeks. Sandra had entered this process expecting to walk away with the house, a significant share of the business, and support payments that would have set her up for years. What she walked away with was considerably different. The business was entirely excluded from the settlement. The documentation was too clean, the case law too clear. Danny and I retained full ownership, no encumbrance, no claim. The house was sold and the proceeds split, but not evenly. Given the fault finding and the disparity in contributions to the mortgage in the early years, the court applied discretion. I received 58% of the net proceeds. Sandra received 42%. Joint accounts were divided evenly. Retirement accounts, each kept their own. Sandra received no spousal support. Texas does allow for it under certain conditions, but the evidence of fault and her own established income made it a difficult argument to sustain. Our son would split time between us with a schedule built around his school and activities. I made sure that part was fair. Whatever had happened between Sandra and me, he was still her son. That part I never questioned. When I signed the final documents, Patricia shook my hand and said, "You came in prepared." That made everything possible. I thanked her. Then I went out to the parking lot and called Danny. "It's done," I said. He was quiet for a second. "Dad would have said you handled it right." "I tried to," I said. "Here's what I want to say to anyone who's sitting where I was sitting, at that kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee, listening to the sounds of a marriage packing itself into canvas bags. The panic you feel in that moment is real. The sense that everything you built is suddenly in danger. That's real too. I won't tell you it isn't. But panic is not a strategy. Anger is not a strategy. What saved me wasn't rage or revenge. It was documentation. It was knowing exactly what I owned, exactly what I'd built, and exactly who had built it with me. My father never talked much about money or property or legal structures. He talked about work, about showing up, about leaving something behind worth leaving. He didn't know, when he signed that will and left that business to his 2 sons, that 15 years later it would matter in a courtroom in Lubbock County. But it did. Every paper he signed, every record my accountant had kept, every decision Danny and I had made with counsel, all of it mattered. Sandra had posted on social media the week she moved out, something along the lines of starting a new chapter and knowing her worth. Her friends left supportive comments. I didn't say anything. I didn't respond. I just kept going to work. She found out what I knew and what I'd prepared, the same way most people find out things they should have known sooner. Sitting across the table, looking at a stack of papers, watching a lawyer quietly dismantle every assumption they'd carried into the room. I don't carry satisfaction about that. I don't feel like I won a game. What I feel is something quieter than that, closer to relief or maybe clarity, like the difference between a storm and the morning after it, when everything is still and you can finally see what's still standing. The business is still standing. Danny runs the day-to-day now. I've stepped back a little to spend more time with my son during my weeks with him. We picked up 2 new contracts last spring. My father's name is still on the side of the trucks. I drove past Sandra's apartment once, not on purpose, just the route home from a job site. There was nothing dramatic about it. A building like any other building. A life being rebuilt like mine. I hope she figures it out. I genuinely do. Not for her sake, or for mine. For our son, who deserves 2 parents who have put themselves back together. That morning I walked out of the attorney's office. It was early October, cool and bright, the way Texas mornings can be in fall. The sky was that particular shade of blue that doesn't last. I sat in my truck for a few minutes and just let it be quiet. My phone buzzed. It was my son, asking if I was coming to his game on Saturday. I typed back, wouldn't miss it. Then I started the truck and drove toward the job site, where 3 of my father's old clients were waiting for a bid, and the morning was just beginning.